What's good, y'all? Welcome to another edition of the Liberty Cast. I'm your host, Big E. This week, we're going to talk a lot about the disarmament primary, the fallout from New Hampshire, and the results from Nevada. As we're recording this, the caucus is going on. So if we get some results before we finish, we'll definitely relay that to you. And that, of course, implies that the results are actually to be believed. But we'll see how that goes. But we'll also talk about a situation that we all saw coming. And I am not above saying I told you so. AOC forms a PAC and endorses a bunch of far lefties. And the Russia hoax is back. For a group that is so closely tied to Hollywood, you would think that they'd be at least a little more, never mind. Creativity left the building a long time ago in Hollywood. My mistake. Anyway, we'll get into all of that and a whole lot more straight ahead. Now, with the primary season in full swing, it's easy to forget that there is a Republican primary. There are actually some challengers to President Trump, and I do use that term very loosely. The former governor of Massachusetts, Bill Weld, and a guy named Rocky De La Fuente. Now, Bill Weld actually has a pledged delegate. I doubt he'll get many more than that, but the fact that he actually has one suggests that no, it doesn't. He has one. President Trump has 64, I believe. But there were a couple of other challengers. Joe Walsh, a former Illinois congressman, and Mark Sanford. They both launched campaigns but have since dropped out. And you are easily forgiven if you had no idea that they actually tried to primary President Trump. Because I knew about Joe Walsh because I follow him on Twitter for some inexplicable reason. Before President Trump got elected, he actually had some decent thoughts. He actually had some decent tweets. And then as soon as President Trump got elected, he lost his mind. Check out his Twitter feed sometime. It's insane. I follow him now. I still follow him now just for that entertainment value. But anyway, and Mark Sanford, former governor of, I believe, South Carolina, I had no idea he tried to challenge Trump. But anyway, they're gone now. But clearly, Trump is cruising towards the nomination. If the left keeps up their shenanigans as it stands, he's going to cruise right back into the White House. But obviously, technically, he's cruising towards the nomination. But don't let that fool you into a false sense of complacency. In New Hampshire, President Trump got 129,000 plus votes. Now, to put that in perspective, the last four incumbent presidents, Reagan in New Hampshire had 65,033. Clinton had 76,797. Bush 2 had 53,962. And Obama had 49,080. And President Trump had nearly 130,000 votes. Now that means the voters in New Hampshire were wildly enthusiastic, and that is fantastic. But when looking at that result, everyone else around the country has to match that enthusiasm. What we can't do is look at that and say, oh, come on, he's got it. We don't have to worry about that. No. When it's time for you to vote in that primary, you need to get out and vote. Just because Trump got double Reagan's vote count in New Hampshire and came close to doubling Clinton's and tripling Bush's and Obama's, we cannot look at that and set cruise control and think it's just going to be a walk in the park, because it's not. These leftists are coming, and this is just the beginning. So we know the leftists are coming. We need to stick our foot in the tank and go all out, balls to the wall, and let folks know that we need to vote red in November. And we need to vote red in the primary, first of all, because we can't let what happened in Virginia happen anywhere else in the country. But we'll come back to that in a second. But first, let's talk about Nevada and the disarmament primary. Now, I started preparing the show before the caucus, and I'm recording it before any results have come out. So now you know when this show is produced, if it hasn't been obvious already. Anyway, if past is prologue, we may not find out for a while after the conclusion of the caucus who won. Maybe they got it together, maybe they didn't, who knows, but we'll definitely let you know. But did any of you all watch the debate? Wow, what a show. Yeah, I watched it. I missed the first 10 minutes or so I missed this.
I'd like to talk about who we're running against. A billionaire who calls women fat broads and horse-faced lesbians. And no, I'm not talking about Donald Trump. I'm talking about Mayor Bloomberg. Democrats are not going to win if we have a nominee who has a history of hiding his tax returns, of harassing women, and of supporting racist policies like redlining and stop and frisk. Look, I'll support whoever the Democratic nominee is, but understand this. Democrats take a huge risk if we just substitute one arrogant billionaire for another.
Now, it seems to me that she and the rest of the leftists in the disarmament primary would be setting their sights on Sanders. But that being said, that set the tone for what was going to be a pretty horrible night for Bloomberg. But he did land a couple of nice shots, like this one on Sanders.
What a wonderful country we have. The best-known socialist in the country happens to be a millionaire with 3 houses. What I miss here?
That was pretty good. Sanders didn't know what to do with that one. Later on, though, he landed this one, which, when you hear it, makes you realize that he doesn't quite have the leftist bona fides that the rest of them do. I mean, he's still a leftist, but well, just listen.
I can't think of ways that would make it easier for Donald Trump to get reelected than listening to this conversation. It's ridiculous. We're not going to throw out capitalism. We tried that. Other countries tried that. It was called communism, and it just didn't work.
Now, did you hear that at the end? Elizabeth Warren was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And somebody else, I think it might have been Lester Holt. Ooh. Seriously? Like, communism is this great thing, and Bloomberg just insulted this great institution? Come on. He's not right on much, and don't let him fool you into thinking he is a capitalist, because he's one of those fair weather capitalists that it's good for me, but not for thee. But on the point he made about communism, he is 100% correct. And obviously, Sanders made his money through capitalism. He wrote a book, I think he wrote a few books that somehow, mystifyingly, people wanted to buy, and he made money. I mean, that's what the American dream is. Produce goods or services that people want, and they will pay you. He produced a book, people wanted to buy it, they paid him, and now he's a millionaire with 3 houses. Come on. I'm not going to get into a full recap of what happened. I've already spent more time on this than I really wanted to. But there were a couple of other highlights that I did want to bring to your attention. Now, by the accounts of most talking heads, Joe Biden had a okay day, okay debate. I didn't think it was that good because it seemed like every time it came time for him to speak, he started off his sentence with, "I'm the only one."
I'm the only one on this stage that actually got anything done on health care. I'm the only person on this stage that's beaten Mitch McConnell. I'm the only one who spent extensive hundreds of hours in Latin America. I've met with this president. I've been deeply involved in making sure that we have a policy that makes more sense than this god-awful president we have now.
I'm pretty sure he said it more than that on the debate stage. I could be wrong, but anyone who's paying attention knows that that's his go-to line. He says it all of the time. Then there was the fireworks between Buttigieg and Klobuchar. And for some reason, he was needling her for a good chunk of the night. He tried to hit her on brain farting on the name of the Mexican president. It happens. I mean, of all the things you could criticize her for, I think that was one of the least egregious. I mean, it happens. Names escape people all the time. Not a big deal. But then he also tried to get her on voting to confirm Trump's pick for head of Customs and Border Patrol, who he claimed was one of the architects of the family separation policy at the border. Dude, that started under Obama. But, I mean, hey, details or something. But then Klobuchar, she fires back, and she kept firing back. I'm not going to play the sound for it. She beat him down pretty good. I think she was actually really, really pissed off at him. I mean, she basically said he was a little boy trying to sit at the adult table, which is true. And truth is something very rarely heard on a Democrat debate stage. But hey, something that actually really did surprise me, though, is that the subject of gun control didn't come up during this debate, which, considering the fact that Mayor Bloomberg was on the stage, I was expecting gun control to come up in some form or fashion. But then again, I guess it's really not that surprising that it didn't.
I think, at least in broad terms, we're largely pulling in the same direction on policy.
So when you take a step back and remember that there really isn't, there's hardly any difference in policy between any of the leftists that were on that stage or the ones that they left out, like Tulsi Gabbard. But that does bring us to the Bloomberg-funded, radical, anti-Second Amendment group, Everytown for Gun Safety. And we'll get to that on the other side of this quick break. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Remember how I mentioned early on in the first segment how we need to keep the pressure on and not let what happened in Virginia happen anywhere else? Well, Bloomberg's group, Everytown for Gun Safety, has pledged to spend $8 million of their $60 million budget in Texas to support the re-election of Texas Democrat reps Lizzie Fletcher and Colin Allred, and to elect, quote, gun sense candidates to the seats of retiring reps, Republican reps, Pete Olson, Will Hurd, and Kenny Marchant. They also want to support challengers to Texas Republican Rep Dan Crenshaw, Michael McCall, Chip Roy, and John Carter. Everytown has said that they need to flip 9 seats in Texas to have a quote, gun sense majority. We simply cannot let that happen. Voters in Virginia let it happen, and now they have a huge fight on their hands. So before it reaches that pitch, here in Texas, we need to nip that in the bud. We can't be complacent. We can't say, oh, that'll never happen here in Texas. Come on, this is Texas. Yes, this is Texas. But Virginia used to be reliably conservative too, and it wasn't that long ago. A little further back in the day, California used to be reliably conservative as well. And now look at them. California is as hostile to the Second Amendment as any state. And Virginia, they're doing everything they possibly can to catch up, with the help of people like Mike Bloomberg and George Soros. Second Amendment advocates are fighting back. And they did defeat the assault weapons ban for this legislative session, and that's fantastic. But, my fellow Texans, please do not let that happen here. We don't want to be playing catch-up. We don't want to be playing from behind like that, because that could lead to some horrific, unanticipated consequences. So I'm sure you may be asking yourself, like what? Well, let's take another example from Virginia. The Senate Democrats in Virginia killed a proposed amendment to the state budget that would have provided a 3% cost of living increase for county sheriffs and their deputies. Senator Bill Stanley, the one who proposed that amendment to the budget, he went to get a vote count. And the Senate Majority Leader, Dick Saslaw, the one who introduced the assault weapons ban bill that got defeated, said, quote, "Hey, Stanley, you want to know why your sheriff didn't get a raise? Because they came to our committees and said that they weren't going to enforce our laws." When I asked him which law he was talking about, he said gun control, end quote. Now, of course, we know the left can be vindictive, but I believe that this interaction went down pretty close to the way Senator Stanley says it did. So we don't want anything like that happening here. And if we let Mike Bloomberg and Everytown for Gun Safety and Moms Demand Action, or whatever that group is that Shannon Watts is a part of, if we let them come in and get some of these leftists elected, something like that is bound to happen here. So as we talk about just about every week on this show, the Second Amendment, your right, my right to keep and bear arms is under attack. And a lot of people are battening down the hatches, preparing for the worst possible outcome. Most gun owners, myself included, well, I lost mine in a tragic boating accident, but I still support and defend the Second Amendment. Anyway, most gun owners are content, or at least are allowing for the system to work itself out, allowing for the process to take effect and our elected officials to protect our right to keep and bear arms. And most people like that, myself included, are pretty much just cracking jokes, posting memes about the boogaloo. And if you spent any time on social media, if you spent any time, especially in conservative social media, on Instagram, Twitter, Parler, Reddit, you'll see a lot of these memes, a lot of these jokes talking about the boogaloo. I'm pretty sure we talked about this before. The boogaloo is the colloquial term for the civil war that would ensue if the government tried to take everybody's guns. Now, of course, the possibility at some point down the line, we're not there yet. We're not even close to there yet. And nobody is advocating for that to happen, especially here. But should things go the way people like Bloomberg and Sanders and Warren, should things go the way they want them to go, well, then that becomes more of a realistic, unfortunate outcome. But for the most part, people are just, like I said, content to let the system play out. And these memes and jokes are just a way to try and bring some levity to a tense situation. A very serious situation, to be sure. But I mean, that's what the internet, that's what social media is for. The left, however, is taking the proliferation of these memes and these jokes very seriously. Of course, there are some fringe extremists who would love to see a second civil war kick off. I am not one of them. Don't count me as one of them. I do like my boogaloo memes every now and then, don't get me wrong. But I am not one of these people that is itching to level my rifle at fellow Americans. That's not what any sane individual wants. Having said that, there's a reason why these memes and these jokes are circulating the way they are. And that's because people can see on the horizon something like that actually happening. And we can laugh and joke about it now. But one thing we have to keep in mind is that what Bloomberg and Governor Blackface and the rest of the leftists that are trying to take these guns away, the things that they're proposing could very well lead to these jokes, these memes becoming a reality. And that's not easy to say. But I'm not here to blow smoke. I'm here to tell you what is real. And what is real is that there is a very real possibility that these memes and jokes could turn serious like that if the leftists get their way. which is why it is so vitally important that we vote in these primaries, that we vote in these general elections, that we make sure that we can keep that at bay and not let these leftists do what they want to do and try to take our guns away. All right, on to some better news. In Georgia, a legislative subcommittee unanimously approved a bill that would allow any concealed carry licensee in the country to legally carry a firearm in the state of Georgia. And they're sending this bill on to the full House Public Safety Subcommittee vote, and it's expected to pass. It needs to pass out of the House and then be sent to the Senate by March 12th in order to stay alive in this legislative session. Now, should this bill become law, it would establish universal reciprocity in the state. Because right now they have individual reciprocity agreements with 32 other states in the country. And this would make it universal throughout the other 49 states. The bill's sponsor, Mandy Bollinger, says that this legislation will make Georgia a more attractive destination for gun owners. Well, yeah, it will. But of course, Moms Demand Action, another one of Bloomberg's ridiculously radical anti-Second Amendment groups, said that allowing permit holders from other states to carry their weapons in Georgia will make it more difficult for local Georgia law enforcement to keep their community safe. And of course, they're wrong, because concealed carry holders are more law-abiding than the general population, more law-abiding than even police officers. I mean, they just toss out crap. And of course, most people who are not informed, I'm excluding gun owners because we know this stuff, but people who are not gun owners and not educated about this stuff, they're going to believe this crap. But House Bill 787 looks like it's in good shape to actually pass and get signed into law. But if you're listening to this show in Georgia, I would urge you to contact your state representatives and urge them to support this bill. All right, let's take a quick break. And when we get back, I'm going to say, I told you so. My wife will tell you that I have no problem telling you I told you so. When I think I'm right, I'm going to need solid proof that I'm not. And I am telling you right now, I told you so. What am I talking about? A female inmate at the Logan Correctional Center in Illinois claimed that she was raped when a man, pretending to be a woman, was transferred into her housing unit. I mean, who could possibly have seen this coming? Oh, wait. I did. Most sentient human beings with at least 2 functioning brain cells to rub together called this. But surprisingly, not just us as conservatives, but there are a number of leftist feminist groups that have actually expressed concern about this and says that women are being put at risk of assault by these men. They keep wanting to push men claiming to be women into women's public restrooms, into women's correctional facilities. They keep wanting to push boys pretending to be girls and teenage boys pretending to be girls to get a look at them in a locker room. Do you really think that some horny teenage boy is not going to try that? Come on. But anyway, there is no data to suggest that these men pose less of a risk than if they were men not pretending to be women, but in a co-ed prison. I mean, it's just ridiculous. And like I alluded to earlier, we're seeing this play out in women's athletics right now. where girls are losing to boys who are pretending to be girls. Men pretending to be women are competing in the Olympic marathon trials. Some high school girls in Connecticut actually filed a lawsuit against their athletic conference to block biological males from competing against girls. One of the girls came in third behind two biological boys and missed out on going to the state finals because two of the people that came in ahead of her were biological males. And if they hadn't been allowed to compete, she would have been able to go on to the state championships. I've been talking a lot lately about the differences between leftists and conservatives. And here's another one. The leftists have this anything goes mentality. If it feels good, do it. If you say you're a girl, even though you're walking around with a frank and beans, fine, you're a girl. And that's the end of it. Conservatives, on the other hand, will say, okay, you want to be called a girl, then what? What happens next? Because if anyone can just say they're a girl, what's to stop a boy who couldn't cut it competing against other boys from saying he's a girl, switching to a girls' team, and then all of a sudden start winning? Or a mediocre male MMA fighter decides he wants to be a woman and then competes as a woman and proceeds to cave in the skulls of his female opponents. Or, as in the rape case I mentioned, a male criminal claiming to be a woman gets sent to a women's prison where he can rape his pick of vulnerable captive victims. And that's bad enough. That's ridiculous enough as it is. But the left is so invested in making this work. And I don't understand why, but they are so invested that they're willing to engage in a cover-up. There's a federal lawsuit pending in Illinois on this case where that female inmate says that after being sexually assaulted in June of 2019, she was coerced, and in prison you know what that's likely to mean. She was coerced by a supervisor into denying the attack took place, and then was punished for filing a false, quote-unquote, complaint under the Prison Rape Elimination Act. So it's believe all women unless they're accusing a leftist or a tranny. Are those the rules now? Because I'm really having a hard time keeping up. They talk about how these draconian gun laws are worth it if it saves even one life. So if they're really interested in safety, and we've established many times on this show that they're not, but let's just stipulate for the record that they are. Why then would they deliberately put women in harm's way like this? Of course, they say that there is no risk, but this lawsuit obviously says different. Now, the suspect in this case was moved to the women's facility because he claimed that he was getting sexually harassed and assaulted by other inmates in the male prison. So he goes to a female prison where he can assert his dominance. You know, I had a dog once who didn't like his place in the family pack. Obviously, I'm the big dog. Then my wife, then him. Then we got a new puppy who, when he grew up, he asserted his dominance over the older pup. And then, so basically he became the alpha dog behind the big dog, me, obviously. But one day when I was at work, the dog that got knocked down a peg knocked my wife down the stairs and then stood over her, trying to assert his dominance. He was rehomed the next day. But the point is that, just like that dog, this tranny moved to a place where he could assert his dominance instead of getting dominated. This seems so obvious. I'm truly mystified that they either A, didn't see this coming, or B, saw it coming and didn't think it was a big deal. Either one of those options is terrible. Because if they didn't see it coming, then they're stupid. And if they saw it coming and didn't care, then they're heartless, soulless assholes who don't give a damn about women. Whether you're talking about high school or college girls that are being victimized by boys and men pretending to be girls and women, or you're talking about female criminals, neither one of them deserve to be victimized in this way. Whether it's being robbed of opportunities on the athletic field or being raped in a prison cell. If you're okay with either of those scenarios, if you're okay with either of those situations playing out that way, there's something seriously wrong with you. All right, there's a couple more quick things I want to get to before we get you out of here. The Russia hoax is back. The Russia hoax redux. The media is reporting yet again that Russia is trying to interfere in our elections on behalf of President Trump. This is coming from the same sources, mind you, the same sources that gave us the last Russia hoax. And we saw how that turned out. So we know this is a hoax. We know the last one was a hoax. We're not going to relitigate that. But let's ask the obvious question. Why would they work to support a guy who has levied a lot of sanctions against them and armed their enemies? Trump has levied numerous sanctions against them. Just recently, a sanction against Gazprom, their largest natural gas provider. He's also fighting the pipeline that they want to build between Russia and Germany, which would be an extreme benefit to Russia. And Trump is fighting that. Why would they interfere on behalf of that guy? Well, as it turns out, the intelligence community has informed the Sanders campaign that Russia is trying to interfere in the election on his behalf, too. This presents a few questions. First, why would they want to make sure that Trump remains in office? In 2016, he was an unknown. But even then, Obama was clearly sympathetic to Russia. Hillary was of his ideological persuasion and just as sympathetic. She sold them 25% of our uranium, for crying out loud. So why wouldn't they have interfered on Hillary's behalf? But now that Bernie's in the race and a front runner, why wouldn't they interfere on his behalf? He honeymooned over there. He's expressed nothing but admiration for Russia and other commie regimes like Venezuela, Nicaragua, Cuba. Sanders is ideologically aligned with Putin. And based on his past statements,
as a socialist, the word socialism does not frighten me. I think
it's funny, sometimes American journalists talk about how bad a country is because people are lining up for food. That's a good thing. In other countries, people don't line up for food. The rich get the food and the poor starve to death.
To China and its leadership is, if I'm not mistaken, they have made more progress in addressing extreme poverty than any country in the history of civilization. Okay, so they've done a lot of things for their people.
But I remember, for some reason or other, being very excited when Fidel Castro made the revolution in Cuba. I was a kid and I remember reading that. And it was just seemed right and appropriate that poor people were rising up against rather ugly rich people. You may recall way back in, 1961, they invaded Cuba. And everybody was totally convinced that Castro was the worst guy in the world, and all the Cuban people were going to rise up in rebellion against Fidel Castro. They forgot that he educated their kids, gave them health care, totally transformed the society. But just because Ronald Reagan dislikes these people does not mean to say that the people in their own nations feel the same way.
he would love to transform this country into the UASS, the Union of American Socialist States. But why are they reporting this now? Well, with Trump, they just hate Trump, and they figure if at first you don't succeed, try again, I guess. But with Sanders, they're doing it to Sanders because they're afraid that if he gets the nomination, Trump is just going to wipe the floor with him. And that's probably true. But even if it is true, who else is going to... Bernie Sanders actually, I think, has the best of the slim chances to beat President Trump. Not that that's saying much, but President Trump would destroy Pocahontas. He would destroy Bloomberg. He would eat Alfred E. Newman's lunch, Pete Buttigieg. Klobuchar, who can barely keep it together on stage, standing next to Buttigieg, would just collapse facing off against President Trump. And Biden, please, he would get destroyed. Tulsi Gabbard might be able to present some sort of challenge, and she might be able to hold her own against him on a debate stage, but still, she would have no shot against Trump. So, I think, like I said, Sanders probably has the best of the slim chances to beat him. But the establishment does not want an avowed socialist. Even though ideologically they are all simpatico, they do not want an avowed socialist to actually get that nomination. Because I think they recognize that they're about as far left as they can get away with. They need some time to get people used to the status quo now before they can try to shift that Overton window even further left. But when you have people like Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and we'll talk about her here in a second, and the Democrat Socialists of America pulling even further left, they don't want that. They see how things are going right now with President Trump. They see how the country is on board with what he's doing. They see how wages are rising and the economy's booming. And people are going to want more of that. And they know that they don't offer that. And putting the socialist, communist label on it by giving him the nomination would ensure that they would have to dig themselves out of a very deep hole if they ever wanted to win another election. And speaking of AOC, could we be witnessing the formation of a new national party? A party called the Democrat Socialists of America, or a socialist party backed by the DSA? Because she's been critical of the Democrat Party.
We don't have a left party in the United States. The Democratic Party is not a left party. The Democratic Party is a center or center conservative party. So this is not a left party. There are left members inside the Democratic Party that are working to try to make that shift happen. And there are a lot of true believers in that we can capitalism our way out of poverty in the Democratic Party. If anything, that's probably the majority.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it.
Oh, she is so stupid. It's painful. Oh my goodness. I'm not even going to try to rebut that right now. It's just so stupid. But to her assertion that the Democrats, the leftists, are not a left party, she has formed a pack called Courage to Change. What is it with these leftists and change? Obama was hope and change. They want to change America. And the obvious question is why? But we'll get to that later. I told y'all a while back that despite her obvious lack of intelligence, she was still a threat. And this pack is a manifestation of that threat. Because her stated goal is to, quote, reward political courage in Congress and also to help elect a progressive majority in the House of Representatives. There's kind of a dual nature to this. One is opening the door to newcomers, and the other is to reward members of Congress that are exhibiting very large amounts of political courage, end quote. So remember how she said that the Democrat Party is not a left party? Well, this is her attempt to make it a left party. And so there are the established members of the Democrat Party that are not quite as far left as she is and Sanders is. So could this create a big enough schism to cause it to separate and have the very far leftist faction form their own party? Or, nightmare scenario, absorb the Democrat Party altogether and just become socialists and admit it? We'll see. But they're trying to say that this PAC is newly formed. But it actually formed in November of 2018, right after she was elected. So it's been in existence for a year and a half. Now, this month, the PAC raised $340,297 through 23,500 contributions. I don't know why they're trying to say it's newly formed. Maybe because it's only raised $340,000. Maybe. I don't know what advantage it gives other than to say that she's hitting the ground running, and in the first month, 350,000, 340,000 might be a pretty decent amount. But after a year and a half in existence, you would think that would be in the millions. But anyway, maybe by saying that it's newly formed, it gives it the impression that it's more impressive than it actually is. But here's the thing. If she is the face of this PAC, there's no possible way it could ever be impressive. But in her tweet about this PAC, she announced that the PAC was endorsing 7 progressive candidates. In the Senate, Cristina Cinsun Ramirez from Texas. And then in the House of Representatives, it's endorsing Teresa Fernandez of New Mexico, Kara Eastman of Nebraska, Georgette Gomez of California, Marie Newman of Illinois, Jessica Cisneros of Texas, and Samalis Lopez of New York. I don't know much about any of them. I don't know anything about any of them yet. But if they're being endorsed by AOC and her PAC, then they must be defeated. All right, y'all, we're out of time. I actually did not get through everything I wanted to get through today. Amy Klobuchar said some things that I wanted to highlight, and so did Elizabeth Warren. Not that they were insightful or anything, just I wanted to make fun of them because it was stupid. But like I said, we're out of time. So I do want to thank you all for spending this time with me today. I really appreciate it. We've been doing some great numbers over the past few weeks, and I want to thank everyone who's listening, sharing. So please, let's keep that momentum going. Check us out on any of your favorite podcast platforms. If we're not on your favorite one, let us know. We'll do what we can to get set up on that platform. But please subscribe, leave a review, let us know what you think. You can also check us out on the website, thelibertycast.net. Go to the podcast page. You'll find all the latest podcasts there. You can also find us on the Right Way's website, therightway.site, SITE. We've partnered up with them, and I think they've been very instrumental in the larger numbers that we've been seeing of late. So I want to thank them for that as well. And of course, we're also on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Parlay, at The Liberty Cast on all 4 platforms. But again, thank you all very much for listening. I really appreciate it. And as usual, keep your head on a swivel and stay safe, everybody.